Hello everybody, it's me the Boss Hog, and we're going to look at my wealth targets for 2022, what they are, what they're based on, and sort of any assumptions, caveats, etc. that I've made. Let's do it. Alright, so first things first, here they are. This is what we're going to be going for. This is a little bit more ambitious than last year for reasons that we'll discuss. If you've watched my previous video for the end of December, you'll see that we added about 60,000 across 2021. This is really looking at us adding 90,000, so a significant increase in that. For reasons that we'll go into, but most of it's around just a couple of changes to our income, as well as hopefully some reductions to our costs, I guess, in fairness, as expected. But yeah, these are the numbers that we're going for. In fairness, for a little bit, I wondered whether these were too ambitious, and to be honest with you, I still think they might be a bit too ambitious, but I'd rather be too ambitious, right, and fall a little bit short on really aggressive targets, especially because it didn't actually bother me as much as I thought it would, the fact that we slightly missed last year's, excluding the one-off adjustment that, again, if you've watched the previous video, you'll understand. That was regarding a re-rating of our house, basically. So yeah, maybe, but like I say, I'd rather actually just show like gradual commitment, keep moving in the right direction. Like, so what if we're only at 390? It's still a tremendous number. It's way better than I thought I'd be at a couple of years ago. Hopefully motivating for anyone's watching. Yeah, and certainly motivating for me, which is kind of arguably the most important, but I am also hoping you guys are getting some income from this, whether that's just watching me, or whether there is actually some motivation here, because again, like I think mostly I'm a fairly normal bloke. I certainly come from really humble origins. I have no familial wealth whatsoever, so to be able to kind of build this sort of wealth already feels like a bit of a dream, to be honest with you, and it's also kind of pretty humbling in a way, just because I know it's not so easy, and also I know that these numbers are big numbers, right? Like, it was interesting, one of my targets to kind of fire is to be in the global 1%, right? Last I looked at that, it was $770,000. Now, if you're in a home in southeast UK or London, you're basically already there, assuming that you own it outright, because you'll struggle to find a decent house under that kind of value in many places in the southeast of the UK. So I think also it can be quite humbling and make you thankful once you start to look at things like that. So we aren't there yet, but this kind of puts us in the top sort of few percent globally, and likewise as well, in the top sort of 10% in the UK, which again isn't so bad. Me and my wife still have a few years hopefully of serious earning. I'm 34, she's 33 now, and hopefully we'll be able to add to this. We've got 20 years until we retire, so hopefully that's time to build a real retirement nest egg, as we'd like to retire pretty fat. Anyway, I mentioned that we were going to go into a bit more detail on the caveats and the assumptions, so let's do that now. Alright, so first of all, here are my assumptions. This is most of my expected sort of assets. Not all of them, but most of the material ones. Do note as well here that the home value isn't deducting the mortgage, so obviously that number, don't add all of this up and then wonder why I'm only going for 400 grand, right? There's a big fat 300 grand mortgage to discount off of this that is definitely there, but these are sort of the growth assumptions that I've been making over the year. Now, first of all, the home value, previously, or last year, I guess I've only just started doing it, I only increased our value of the home by 1.25%, but I've doubled it effectively because I knew it was not enough anyway, but I just didn't want to overquote numbers and then have to revise things down. Much better to revise things up is sort of my attitude here. However, I found a very helpful government website that basically lists total house and flat changes in value year on year, so that was pretty nifty. So I found my borough, basically my council, local government district, for anyone who's not aware of that term, and my borough increased by 2.5% for flats last year, so I'm basically going to be using that, and then in October, when the next one comes out for next year, I'll basically use that number as the new one moving forward and carry on with that method. So I think that's a very good way of doing it, and then what I've basically done is taken that 2.5% annual increase and divided it by 12, and then it adds up right each time. That's basically the increase as it goes. I've done our pensions to increase by 6 to 7%. That's slightly up on last year when it was 6%, but they performed better than I was expecting. The management fees are also very modest. We get discounts. Also as well, for my pension especially, I'm very close to getting the next level of having enough in one of my pension spots to have a further reduction in management fees, so that would be nice. So it's just like a slight reassessment on that, just based on their performance basically. So I've increased that very slightly from what it was last year. ISAs to increase by just under 10%. Now this is also up from last year where I projected it to increase by 8%. So I did expect to outperform the pensions anyway, which have managed slightly differently and have a management cost associated to them, whereas my ISAs are managed by myself and are almost exclusively not ETF. So I'm not even paying like ETF fees, right, for that. They're purely me picking individual stocks. So this year, you know, I did like I can't remember the number, something like 27% on a time-weighted basis. So 10% doesn't seem unreasonable. I had a pretty good first year. I do appreciate a very friendly market, but hopefully this is reasonable. The S&P I read in Forbes was due to increase by 9.6% this year as the kind of analyst consensus. So again, likewise, it doesn't seem too unrealistic to use that number, and that's the number I've based here for the ISA performances. This is one of the more interesting ones. So poker cash to be 1,000 a month. So I almost didn't include this, but I also wanted to keep myself motivated. Now I do have Play More Poker as one of my aims for 2022, and the way I got to £1,000 a month was kind of quite nice in a way. I couldn't believe how perfect it was, but I took 75 sessions, which I don't think is too unrealistic. Actually, I'd like to get to at least 100 sessions, but let's take 75 as something reasonable. 6 hours of play, I think that's a very average, reasonable number. Typically, when I play on weekdays, I play for slightly less. On weekends, slightly longer. I actually prefer longer sessions because I think the longer I sit at a table, the better I get. The more I sort of start to see patterns in players' behaviours and learn to exploit them. So my hourly increases the longer I'm sitting at the table, basically. Up to about 8 hours when it tends to start falling off, which is also interesting. Maybe I get tired, maybe I make loose decisions, etc. And then the 2667 here, this is my long-term 3-year average of live poker play. So fine. Then I multiplied them together and I got £12,001.50, which, I mean, honestly, that's so close to 12 grand, which is then obviously 1 grand a month. It just felt too perfect. So I didn't know that, but I didn't even have to jiggle that in any way. I just picked, you know, 3 numbers for those reasons and out it came. So I decided that because I really want to hit this goal, I like playing poker anyway. I think I am good at it. I am a long-term profitable player. This was a good thing. So I've actually now included £1,000 income a month from poker. The plan here is to build up my poker cash pot to 5 grand, which should sustain me more or less forever. I'm not really a particularly aggressive player, so I tend to see fairly low variances. So once I get to 5 grand, then I can, everything over that, I'll just start contributing as like extra contributions to our stocks and shares, basically. So that's the plan there. The way I've done my joint bank account here, and this did actually climb slower than I was expecting, is I looked at our income and expenses, which we'll go into in just a little bit of a second, and then I deducted some cushion, which was about £500 in most months, and this is the net leftover position, basically. So I did think it would climb a little bit faster than this. It didn't, and probably in fairness, what I will end up doing is I'd like this figure to be about 20 grand, or maybe even more like 25,000, and maybe we'll put it into something like premium bonds where our money's protected, but it might do something interesting. Because I'd like to get 6 months of costs into this into our bank account, and as you'll see in a second, that year end there, sort of 17,000 doesn't really cut it. You know, fine. And likewise here, any income from reduced spending or side hustles is to be added to invest accounts, and you can see there, like with poker, if I just go back to that, the bottom line there, it stops at 5,000, and then the you know, the ISA non-ISA shares Liam then starts to really increase from that level, because anything over that basically gets added. That's basically poker income by another name. Also, I would say as well that we haven't included any bonuses in this. Like if my wife and I get a bonus, I haven't included it in this just because we're not really in the power of that. We kind of are, I guess. But me, I have a new job, and so I have no idea what the bonus policy is going to be like. Obviously, I know what I can get up to, but I don't know how generous they are, what the kind of is going to be said. And to be fair, I mean, I've barely been in my new job for 6 months, so again, I'm still in the early stages. I haven't delivered too much value to get something really sexy, and that's okay. It's to be expected. Likewise with my wife as well, you know, she's still sort of career building, and we go from there. So these are the assumptions. They're a little bit aggressive, I get it. But again, I'd rather aim high, try and work toward these, and then as long as I don't like stress about not hitting them if we don't, I think it's okay. So yeah, so these are the assumptions, but let's have a look at the income and cost now. All right, so I've never really shared this before in any detail. It is slightly exposing, so please treat it with respect, I guess. I know not everyone would be comfortable sharing these numbers, but here it is. So we'll start with our income, and by our income I'm talking about mine and my wife's jobs. So I'm not including dividends, side hustles. I also exclude bonuses, as I've already mentioned. It also includes sort of, this is basically what I class as my take home. So after taxes and also after our pension contributions, which get taken out before tax, right? Again, if you're in the UK, this is common stuff. So I haven't included that. I think because I just didn't want to. I guess I suppose I could have done, but this is like much cleaner to me. Like, this is a number I recognise that will appear in our bank accounts, and etc. So this is our total income for my wife and I. It does include, by the way, a pay rise that my wife got, and also a pay rise that I'm due to get, assuming I pass my probation at work. So I have a modest, I have a 5% pay rise coming if I pass my probation. That was kind of something that me and the recruiter and the company agreed to basically split the difference on some numbers. So that was fine. So that's where we are. Basically, that's our joint income and what it translates to in a month. So in terms of our costs, I basically included most of the major costs. If you were to go down this, you'd probably find something, like where is your X? But these are our material costs, and these are really the things that we can't avoid from my perspective. So the big one here is the mortgage, especially once you include the service charge and ground rent, which again, if you're in a managed flat, is standard stuff, unfortunately. There's also council tax, which again, UK residents will be very familiar with. It's pretty horrible, but there it is. And actually, though, our biggest necessary expense is nursery. I sometimes joke with people that it's like a second mortgage, but you can see here it's actually more expensive than our mortgage. Our daughter does go to a really good school. It was something that I especially pushed for, interestingly enough, but wifey was totally on board. All the evidence suggests to me that how a kid starts life just has such an important ripple for basically the rest of their childhood and even into adulthood. Like, I read some scary studies like comparing sort of kids who had a good upbringing and kids who didn't. So therefore going to a nursery that's really great, in my opinion, is totally worth the spend. I just think it will pay for itself, and it'll ultimately make a happier, smarter, more confident young girl, which is really what I want. So for me, it's totally money well spent. Then we've got food here, which is based on a 6-month average of our food spend. Again, I think this is quite high, actually. I'm considering doing a challenge for myself to reduce this, just because I think it would be good for me and my budget. Me growing up, I mean, you should see, like, my mum could work wonders with a budget, right? It did mean sometimes we were having like noodles for dinner or jack of potato and baked beans, but it was incredible what she could actually do with such little money. Like, I feel slightly weirdly embarrassed spending that kind of money on food. That doesn't even include like one-off things, one-off drinks, or like if I buy like a nice whiskey or something. In fairness, it does include things like nappies, baby milk, etc. So there is that. Like, it is more expensive. Having a baby, as you might imagine, but still, this to me is a very high figure. I'd like to see an improvement in this number. I haven't budgeted that, by the way, into my assumptions, but it is one of the ways that I think we could reduce our spend. Then water is quite expensive here if you're in the UK, I recognise, but living in London, we basically have like overpayment for multiple things, mainly sewage infrastructure improvement gets taken out of London water bill payers, so this is quite high compared to London. When I was living in Guildford, which is still in the southeast, still a fairly expensive city, my water bill is like 20 quid, so that is fairly expensive. And insurances here is mostly for contents insurance and pet insurance, and also I have like life assurance cover as well, which will basically cover the mortgage if I die. So that's one of the nicer ones there. I mean, that's not a nice thing at all. Hopefully it won't happen, but it will mean that, there's no mortgage costs anymore for my wife. So these are most of our costs there. This did come out to more than I was expecting in terms of the percentage of our total. I think, like, in my head, I just wasn't quite including things like shopping. Food here, I've called it, right? But it's basically shopping. That was like in my head when I thought about necessary spend. For some reason, I was just like excluding it, but actually, it's pretty necessary, right? These aren't like meals out or anything else, to be clear. This is like what we're buying from the supermarket. So, like, in my head previously, I'd spoken about like 40% of our income is necessary costs, and then 40% is like investments, which does match, as you'll see in a second, or might have already noticed. But then I was like, 20% is wasted. Actually, it's not really true. Like, 20%, maybe there's some room there to say, yeah, some of it's wasted, but as you can see, like, that's 8%, and that's pretty significant in terms of our total, what our income goes on, basically. So that was quite surprising to me, because like in my head I'd only included like mortgage and nursery, and then sort of a few other things, just rounded up to 40, but it was quite eye-opening to see it in this regard. So so there's that. So yeah, And then outside of that, I've assumed here leftovers is basically anything that isn't necessary plus investments. Investments here are 2 ISAs that I said to my wife are basically my red line from an investment perspective. It's so important for my wife and I that we fill up our ISAs each year. Like, I do not want to be investing less than 40 grand a year, frankly. It's so tax efficient. Both my wife and I pay higher rate tax, as well as the fact that we can access our ISA at any time. So, you know, if I want to retire when I'm 55 and my wife would be 53, you know, we don't have access to our state or private pensions at that age. So we need our ISA. It's basically our main income. And because we hope to retire so well, you know, like, we're going to be earning a lot of money in our retirement in a weird way. I know it sounds weird to say that. It sounds weird to me as well, by the way. But, you know, the ISA, because you've already paid tax when you pay money into your ISA, you don't pay any tax when you withdraw it, right? So again, being able to sort of spend tens of thousands, even low 6 figures from our ISA income is really very significant, because the you know, the effective amount that you have to earn before tax in order to have the same kind of money is just pretty ridiculous. So the ISA forms a significant part of our retirement strategy, and so we need to fill it up each year. 20 grand is the maximum you can put in each year, and, you know, me and my wife have one each, right? It's individual. So that's the plan there. And then Aurelia's ISA here, this is our daughter. So me and my wife did talk about doing more than this. I think you can put in something like 9,000 a year as the threshold, but like, she gets access to it when she's 18. Like, I wasn't really very sensible as an 18-year-old, and, you know, we also wanted our daughter to have a little bit of adversity, right? Like, I mean, my wife was born in communism, I was born in an estate, right? Like, we didn't have a particularly exotic starts, and I think it's something that as a parent you're mindful of. Like, you don't want your kid to just be spoiled, like, especially at the moment she's an only child, right? So I just don't want her to be like that only child stereotype. So I think, like, this is a nice amount. Like, hopefully we'll get her interested in investing. Like, I'm going to tell her about it at a relatively young age, try and be as open as I can with her. Obviously she can just watch these videos anyway, right? Fine. So, you know, she's going to have like almost a mid 5-figure number by the time she's 18-year-old, right? Because of the power of compounding effectively and contributions. Like, that to me is enough money for an 18-year-old, right? She's going to be able to buy a car, you know, pay for uni if that's what she wants to do. Maybe she wants to start like an investment or a business herself. Like, this is enough money for an 18-year-old. You know, if she chooses then to spew it away, fine. I'm considering and trying to talk my wife into it, kind of doing a deal with her. So, you know, whatever she has left by, say, 21 or 25, we match, to sort of encourage her to be a little bit sensible in how she spends. Like, I personally think that would be a good idea. Maybe it will depend what kind of person our daughter turns into. And, you know, my wife's kind of the opinion, well, once she's 18, it's on her anyway, so it's up to her what she does, right? We can choose to give her the money if we want to, but why? So just slight different approach having that conversation at the moment. I just know how I was as an 18-year-old, and my daughter's very much like me in terms of personality, which even my wife agrees with. So that's the approach there effectively. So like I say, this is our basically our working income, so more or less guaranteed. I suppose mine isn't yet guaranteed in a way, because, you know, my employer can fire me in a week's notice because I'm still in my probation period. But also I'm pretty confident I could get another job. I'm fairly confident also that's not going to happen. But, you know, these are contracted hours and, you know, reasonable protection in the UK for getting fired once you have a full-time job. But I haven't included bonuses, so that would make a potentially a material contribution. My bonus especially could be quite generous, but again, I'm not really expecting it to be, just because I haven't been in the job long enough to deliver the kind of value that would be needed to secure 5-figure bonuses, basically, which is, you know, what I could get. So I think it's okay to not include them, because I don't think they'll make a super material difference, even if they're on the upper end for both wifey and myself. And that's currently where we are. So yeah, these are the assumptions, and 2022 as planned. Obviously, if we're going to hit our targets, we have to both win some money playing poker, and we also have to be a little bit disciplined with our spending, either, you know, not wasting as much, or maybe cutting down a little bit on especially our food shopping, and maybe just being a little bit smarter as well with how we spend money. So that's the plan. Anyway, hopefully again that's nice and transparent. I do feel slightly exposed sharing this, but again, I'm trying to be a bit more transparent, and I mean, I talk about this stuff anyway, so it's what it is. It's just weird to see it all in one place like this, so out in the open, but this is where we currently are. And I guess my channel is meant to be for this kind of stuff. So if anyone has any questions, like I said, I'll do my best to answer them. And yeah, this is basically me and the plans for 2022. Alright, well thank you very much everyone, hopefully that was interesting. I've been the Boss Hog, and good luck with your wealth building. Bye for now.